Okay, well, shall I kick off? Lovely. Well, this is a very unusual situation, as I'm sure we're all become accustomed to, but it is my pleasure to be here today. And thank you for inviting me to today's event. Before I go any further, can I just check that the sound is okay because I have an echo at my end? It's okay. Okay. Well, I will go boldly on in that case. And on that note, Britain's space industry, of course, is a success story of invention and innovation, enterprising spirit, and global ambition. And it's fundamental to our country. And this government is ambitious about growing our space sector, and will soon be publishing its national space strategy. And I'm very privileged to be the minister in the Department of Transport that's responsible for space strategy. Last month, we laid the new commercial spaceflight regulatory package before Parliament, which will enable commercial space launch to take place from UK soil for the first time. And these new regulations will support safe and sustainable activities that will drive research, innovation, and entrepreneurship in the sector. The sky has never been the limit for us. Our vision is to create a world-leading market, growing the UK space economy through regular, reliable, and responsible access to space, and making the UK a home to game-changing spaceflight technology. The sector will help to strengthen our national capabilities, create high-skilled jobs, and level up the UK. Now, I'd like to move on to asking our distinguished panel members some questions, and I'll start by introducing them. So we have Professor Gavin Shaddick, who is Chair of Data Science and Statistics, Director of UK RI, CDC Environmental Intelligence, Co-Director of Joint Centre for Excellence in Environmental Intelligence. And he represents the University of Exeter and the Alan Turing Institute. We also have Sarah Macken, Director of UK Business Development from Airbus, UK Space and Defence, Dr. Raffael Jovine, co-founder and chief scientist from SuSeWi, John Roth, Vice President, Business Development from Sierra Nevada Corporation, and Ian Jones, the CEO of Goonhilly Earth Station Limited. And I propose that I will pose the question, and then after the panelists come in, and I can't see the panelists, so perhaps someone could help me by indicating who wishes to respond to the first question, which is, given the challenges to feed growing populations, how can remote sensing help to produce more human food and in the oceans? And who would like to come in on this question?
Hi, Raffael Jovine.
Thanks, Raffael.
Everybody knows mariculture and aquaculture is growing worldwide, very extensively. But much more fundamentally than that, there are 5 gigatons of animals in the ocean versus just 1 gigaton of animals on land. And they all need to be fed. So there's 5 times more food in the ocean. And fundamentally, that makes quite a lot of sense because ocean plants, sea plants, are much more efficient at photosynthesis than land plants are for lots of good reasons. And they are also the source of all the good things that we think about when we think about fish. Easy to digest protein, the color, the flavor, the omega-3 oils, all of these things ultimately come from sea plants. And we already are eating these things today in the form of gels and jellies and things in ingredients that color in our margarine. They all come from marine organisms. But it's a very, very tiny portion of agriculture. So what we need to figure out is how to take advantage of this enormous resource and manage it effectively instead of just pulling out the top predators. Imagine if we didn't just live on cheetahs. We'd have a lot more food. So the idea is that if we succeed with all the things you saw in the video, and there's a lot of things that have to still go well, by 2035, our organization alone, just from those initial farms in Morocco and Oman, we can grow 16 billion portions of pork, of protein equivalent pork substitutes. And that's just us. And we can license this to people all around the planet. So in that sense, the potential is enormous. And it's a lot of fun, actually. And I quite like eating the algae, so I hope you will as well. Anyway, any of you guys?
No, I think I agree. It's Ian Jones here, Minter. And the fact that we can use satellite communication, satellite observation to really allow your organisation to expand and to really create the systems that can monitor and control that. I think this is where the marrying of these technologies really allow things to happen on a scale that's needed.
Thank you so much, Ian and Raffael. Did anybody else want to add anything on that first question?
Sarah Macken here from Airbus. I think
Sarah.
Hi there, good morning. So some of what we've seen this morning is how satellite imagery and data can really enhance the decisions that we take. And so I think that there's a strong role for the UK industry to provide new solutions, new technologies that help us to target where perhaps some future farms might be located. And I think that's really what I would like to add in terms of providing the underpinning decision making. So at Airbus, we're a manufacturer of satellites. We manufacture some of the satellites that have been talked about already this morning. The Copernicus Sentinel missions came from Stevenage. So we're really delighted. Also, Minister, you mentioned the space strategy. We're really looking forward to that at Airbus. We think it's a big opportunity for the whole space sector to really contribute even further to the climate challenge and to providing that information.
Yes, thank you so much. And it is a massive challenge. And what's sort of fascinating in terms of my role is obviously I'm the Minister for the transport aspects and the commercial space flight, but in terms of what the actual space flight and what these applications are doing, there is clearly so much more. And actually, a lot of this is really new to me. So it's fascinating to hear what you're doing. Okay, let's move on then to another really important challenge, which is the challenge of fighting emissions. And do the panel think that satellite data can assist in any way with increased direct air capture to remove and sequester CO2 in the ocean? And I wonder who would like to go first with that one.
Me again, Raffael, Jovine again. Kelp beds, coral reefs, mangrove forests, the seagrass meadows here in Cornwall, Lewis Bay, just around the corner, are the most productive ecosystems on the planet. They produce, they capture 4 times more carbon than our most successful form of agriculture, square meter by square meter. There is enormous potential in terms of just drawing down CO2 if we just restore what was already there and support it. So just to Sarah's point, if you want to manage those resources, monitoring is nice, but actionable daily operational data is much nicer. So the idea of having current data with which you can make an active decision. So for example, CSIRO Oceans and Atmosphere in Australia just released a study where they modeled how they could use targeted interventions to keep the Great Barrier Reef from bleaching. So they have to respond to things like hurricanes and typhoons, dredging, shipping operations, sediment and nutrient runoffs, all of which are local phenomena that are actually relatively manageable if one knows to anticipate them and see them in a timely way. So one of the things that we're very keen on and what you saw in our video is just this idea of getting daily data that is correlated with your local decision-making ability. And the whole point for us developing this for ourselves is simply to be able to forecast what we need to do and then work with that, as opposed to monitoring last year's events. And so there are lots and lots of interventions you can do. I mean, just to illustrate, in California, for example, taking starving sea urchins, bringing them on land to feed them, to fatten them up for human consumption, here's the food solution, allows the kelp gardens to regrow so that they can provide the carbon solution. So yes, there's a lot we can do.
Thank you, Raffael. I'm actually nodding, but then I realised that you can see me nodding, so that's good. But clearly there's so much potential there. Do any of the other panellists have a view on this?
Gavin, Shaddick at University of Exeter. The oceans play an incredibly important part in the ability to attract carbon, and it's really important that we understand that capacity, and some satellite information has been used at our colleagues actually at the University of Exeter in our Penryn campus to estimate the ability of the oceans to absorb carbon dioxide. And the other really important point here is that if the oceans change, if they become more acidic, for example, then its ability to, or the ocean's ability to attract that CO2, it may change. And that's going to be incredibly important as we go forward in dealing with climate change and our ability to adapt to it. So there's kind of two uses there for satellite data and processing it in quite innovative ways using machine learning and artificial intelligence to actually tell us more about how the Earth itself can adapt to climate change, but also how the Earth itself, the oceans, might be changing, and that might change their ability to help us.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much, Gavin. I think that's you're highlighting how everything is interconnected, and it's such a focus at the moment for us as a government to first of all, to reach net zero, but also to focus on the importance of nature, including the oceans, and including the value of nature and those biodiversity challenges as well across the board, across the whole economy, the land and the seas, and of course space as well. So let's move on then to the challenge of space flight. So obviously in putting a rocket into space, there are very clear requirements for those to be sustainable, reusable, to make rockets and spacecraft reusable. And I know that there are many people who are interested in this and making great strides in this area. So does the panel have a view about how this could be done and how it would be environmentally sound and to help save resources? Who would like to come in on that?
Hi. Well, I'm John Roth, and I work for Sierra Nevada Corporation. And we've been developing the Dream Chaser space vehicle. And we're really pleased that we announced this week an agreement with Spaceport Cornwall to look at Cornwall as a landing site for our vehicle once we start flying. Our first mission will be next year to the International Space Station. But certainly the space systems themselves have got to advance. Can you imagine filling an airplane full of cargo or people and flying across the ocean from London to New York, and when you get there, you throw the airplane away and you start over again? And that's virtually what we do with space systems. We launch rockets, and the rockets are done, and that's their job. They're thrown away. Satellites that go up, they go up for 15 years, they operate, and then they burn up in the atmosphere. So it's a very inefficient way that we've been using space vehicles, and that's really needs to change. And that's one of the reasons we've worked so hard to make the Dream Chaser vehicle very reusable. There's very little that needs to be done to the vehicle in between launches. And we think that's really going to be the wave of the future, is reusability and the ability to also take new technologies into orbit more rapidly. Can you imagine a cell phone that you design that has to operate for 15 years and you can't upgrade your technology? Well, that's exactly what we do with satellites now. We design satellites with payloads that are going to be on orbit for 15 years. But the technology's changed so fast, and you have no way to react to that. And that's another way, if you have a reusable vehicle like our Dream Chaser, where we can launch it into orbit. We can keep it on orbit for weeks, months, or even a few years. But then we can land that vehicle. We can take the payloads off. We can put on new payloads or refurbish the payloads and be able to react much more quickly to changes in technology. We really think that not only is the data great that comes off of satellites and from space, but you got to make the space systems more efficient as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just, it's great to hear the work that you're doing. And do you think there are applications for this to look at land vehicles? And because one of the key challenges that I have in my portfolio is I'm responsible for electric cars, vans and lorries, and of course those batteries, we absolutely want to look at how do we reuse and recycle those. Do you think we can learn anything from space operations in this area?
Minister, it's Ian Jones here. I'll answer. I think you certainly can, and I think one of the things about these technologies, we're hearing from Sierra Nevada here, John, and also some of the things that we're doing here at Goonhilly. Some of these technologies take time to develop, and the time scale over which they do develop transcend the timescales of local governments and our governments here. It's really important that one of the things that we've been very good at, I think, in the UK over the last 10 years is having a space programme which has been very consistent. You can ask anybody in the industry about the messages in the space programme. We can all recite them. We do so in our sleep, I think. So that's been really good. But I think we do need to have that long-term view, and we need to make decisions that have an eye to the future. We're in a global competition amongst nations, but we're all living on one planet, which is the planet Earth, and we've got to keep that planet sustainable and livable for our growing population. So I think yes, the technology perhaps to do all of these things has been around since the 1960s. It's having a combination of the environment and the political will to now do something about it, and now is the time to do something about it, I think.
Yeah, Ian, thank you. That's a very good reminder for all of us in government that we need to just make sure that we continue that focus on space, and it's a huge priority for all of us for not only the reasons that I've mentioned earlier, but for the reasons that all the other benefits that come with it, such as we're looking at today. Thank you for that. So let's move on to our next question. And we all know there's lots of research that's done better in space and without gravity, such as medical, such as plants, such as biology. So what does the panel think the benefits of these kind of experiments are, and how do they improve life on Earth? So who would like to have a go at that?
I can answer that one as well. In addition to Dream Chaser, we do a number of other things at Sierra Nevada, and one of the things we do is build payloads for the International Space Station. And one of the payloads we have is the veggie, which actually was the first thing that grew vegetables in the station that the astronauts could eat. And we also are building the advanced plant habitat. And what we've learned from building those systems is directly transferable to being able to grow things on Earth much more efficiently. And when you think about having a zero-G environment, you can't have water, for example. Water beads up into little balls, so you can't put plants in water like you do on Earth. So we had to find ways to grow plants and vegetables in a dry environment, basically. And it directly transforms to how you might grow things in the desert. So we've seen just in the last several years that we've been doing those kind of experiments on the space station. It's huge direct transmission to the Earth. But even though the International Space Station has been operational for decades, they've only scratched the surface of what you can find out from doing things in microgravity. The way crystals arrange themselves in microgravity is totally unique. The ways that gases and liquids are able to combine and subtract from each other is totally different. The ability to have super high heat and also super low cold in the same kind of environment. It allows you to test things out that you could never test on Earth. And they found incredible things in terms of protein and how they grow in space. There's companies right now, commercial companies, that are looking at growing organs in space because the way that tissues and cultures develop in zero gravity is totally unique. And you like to think that, well, the International Space Station's been doing this for 20 or 30 years, but the reality is 80% of the time that the astronauts spend on the space station is in maintaining the space station. And a very small percentage of the time has actually been dedicated to fundamental research and science, but that's starting to change. The ISS now is starting to open up more to commercial companies doing more experimentations. And then there's companies like ours that are interested in building a follow-on commercial space station where there'll be much more interaction with commercial industry. And our goal on our commercial space station will be to make it much more commercial and much less government and try to see a lot more of these fundamental sciences developed.
And John, you mentioned the interaction of the private sector there, and what difference do you expect that to make in terms of the outcomes of the experiments and what is going to be learned from them?
Well, I think we're going to make medical breakthroughs. They've already found breakthroughs in medicine from the International Space Station. There's going to be breakthroughs in farming, as I said, in growing things on Earth. There's going to be breakthroughs in materials. There may be whole new materials that can be developed through nanotubes in space versus doing it on Earth. I think virtually every scientific field you could see some huge benefits from.
Yes, thank you very much. Do any of the other panelists have a view on the benefits of research in space?
Sarah here from Airbus.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi there. One of the projects that we've invested in is a project called Bartolomeo, which actually it's on the International Space Station, similar to what John has already mentioned. And it actually allows companies, it's space that we've invested in, to actually take space and to conduct their own experimentation. And the benefits of using this approach is quite often when you send a spacecraft up in, that's it, you never see it again, you get the data back, and of course we use that. But this approach that we've used under Bartolomeo, companies can actually recover their mission, look at the impact of it being in space, look at the changes that they see in the technology. So I think it's really important that we continue to invest in research programs. We are doing it ourselves, we are investing as an industry. But I think to Ian's point earlier, we also need the government to have a strategy as well that we can align with. Because if we do it together, we as an industry, we make progress much more quickly. And I think that's really the advantage of having government alongside us, is that and I think particularly when it comes to climate technologies, yes, the market can deliver them, but we can deliver them much more quickly if we have the government alongside us really driving those technologies through the system.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. I'm going to come on and ask about partnerships in a moment. Before I do that, I really am keen to just dig into the question of AI and big data. I mean, clearly, again, these are cutting edge areas of research and thinking, and we're keen to understand in government how they contribute towards the race to net zero. What practical applications can we learn from these emerging areas of science? Do any of the panelists have a view on this?
Thank you, Minister. Gavin Shaddick from Exeter.
Hi, Gavin, thanks.
In some ways, where do we start? I think the potential for using AI, data science and satellite information are just enormous to help with the race to net zero. I think traditionally we've thought about monitoring and actually tracking what's happening and assessing the problem and quantifying it. for informing policies and decisions. I think increasingly we can move forward in time and think about actually modeling entire systems of the environment, but also how we interact with it, and building digital twins that we can actually virtually assess the effects of interventions or policy decisions in AI using kind of virtual populations to see what the effects might be before actually implementing them in practice. And that also enables us through linking data systems from different areas and different sectors to actually see potential co-benefits of some decisions, or maybe additional risks. So for example, reductions in carbon emissions through the Paris Agreement will, in some cases, reduce particulate air pollution. So we'll see a reduction in adverse health effects as a co-benefit. There may be things, of course, that might be adverse consequences. And I think if we can assess those virtually before implementing them in the real world, that would be a real step forward. And I think another way that AI and data science and satellite technology is really going to help is in informing the energy grid, distributed generation, or increased reliability on renewables, wind, solar, actually integrating numerical weather models with real-time information to get very, very localized predictions of the kind of capacity and how that will feed into the electricity system, and actually using AI and to actually optimize the distribution system so that we can actually make use of the renewable energy when it's available.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. This challenge of the energy grid and the capacity and the generation and allocating it in a smart way is absolutely where I can see this working. Do any other panelists have an expertise in data science, AI? Have any thoughts about how it can help us?
Indeed, Minister Ian Jones here. So
Hi.
I think, you know, for quite a while now, the last few years, this concept of big data and AI and machine learning have been the buzzwords that everybody wants to engage with, and we are all told that we have to engage with this for the future. But I think we've been looking, and I think what Gavin was saying, that perhaps more pertinent is immediate data and the ability to interpret immediate data quickly. That this is, yes, we can use stored data sets looking back in time, and we can learn an awful lot from that. But actually just using a machine to determine outcomes based on an algorithm that it's honing itself, statistically ends up with anomalies, and you know, we as humans can't actually tell what those anomalies are, and so machine learning on its own is not perfect. Whereas if we use physics-directed signal processing, that you know, the space industry is really excellent at. We do signal processing on data all the time. And particularly, we work very closely with the radio astronomy community here at Goonhilly, where you're trying to pick out real information from very low contrast data in the distant universe. Those techniques that are already highly developed in the UK can be applied, and I think perhaps this is where we've got a unique capability here in the UK. Whilst everyone is saying big data is the thing, actually let's look at physics-directed real-time processing and how we can really excel in that.
Yes, thank you, Ian. A very good reminder to never forget what we've already got, as well as always looking to the future. Okay, I mentioned that I would be keen to talk about how partnerships work, and of course government is one partner, very important partner, and so is industry, universities as well, of course. And what do the panelists, we've got panelists from really, I think, from all these sectors here today, which is great. And I'd be interested in hearing your perspectives in terms of developing policy and also delivering these key sustainability outputs that we're all focused on, whether it's net zero or air pollution or feeding our population in future. So who would like to take that one on first?
I could kick it off. I think I sort of touched upon this in my last answer. I think it's really important to have a partnership approach with government in the sector of space that we're in, because it requires a long-term commitment, significant investment from all those in industry, but also those who commit their careers to the sector. If you're a young person looking to get into space, you want to know that there's going to be an exciting career path for the whole of your life. So I think we have had a lot of commitment from the government to invest in the space sector over many years. The Space Agency's been here for 10 years, and we've had a strong commitment to the European Space Agency. And it feels like there is a reassessment of an approach, a reinvigoration to really, and we hope, raise the game of the space industry and the space community, academia as well. So I think partnerships are important with government, with academia, with the public as well, to also get support for the kind of projects that we're talking about. I'm conscious that we're reaching the end of the session, and I did want to mention the Truths mission. So if you don't mind, Minister, I might just widen the scope of my remarks to include it, which is actually a new UK proposed mission. It's been done under ESA. It's a climate mission, and it's really going to enhance the information that we have to tackle climate change. It's a calibration mission which will improve the data, a lot of the data, and enhance the AI that we can do in the future as well. So what we can take from satellite information that exists is data that's already there, but we can only use what's there. And I think that AI, just to touch on the last question, could actually have a role in identifying what are the gaps in knowledge much more quickly, so that we in the manufacturing sector can start coming up with new missions as well.
Yeah, and we absolutely know that our manufacturers will rise to those challenges, as we've seen with all modes of transport. So I'm just curious, before I move on to the last question, I think it was you, John, who mentioned that with your plans involve a bit less government. Do you still see government having a role, and which other stakeholders and partners do you think are important for you to work with?
Yeah, a big part of our whole business philosophy is partnership. When we start with universities, not only do we have a very active internship program at our company for bringing in university students, which is kind of in our own self-interest, because that's where we get our best employees. But we also have joint research programs that we do with universities. There's work going on at universities that really at the leading edge of some of the technologies that we are looking at. So we will fund some of that research. We'll do combined studies. We'll have students that are engaged in research projects with us during the year. And then the third thing that we'll do is actually have universities work on some of our systems. For example, structural testing of our Dream Chaser vehicle was done at the University of Colorado in Boulder, which is only about 20 minutes away from our facility. And we've had universities that have mocked up what the astronaut controls and displays would be for a crude version of our vehicle. So we've had a great partnership with universities. Obviously, we partner with the government all the time in public-private partnerships. In the US, that's become kind of a standard way of life. The way we developed Dream Chaser was in a public-private partnership with NASA, where NASA helped fund part of the vehicle, but our company put in a substantial amount of our own investment to develop that vehicle, because we can use it for commercial applications. And then finally, the international partnerships. We formed very strong bonds with many companies in Europe that are leaders in the space industry, because they have capabilities and they are getting funding from their governments that are complementary to the funding we get from our government. So we very much are interested in international partnerships, which is one of the reasons that we were very interested in having an international landing site for Dream Chaser. And so Cornwall is going to be the first spaceport that we're working with to do that.
Well, fantastic. And I'm really excited about my first visit to Cornwall Spaceport, which I'm really hoping, and of course all the other UK spaceports around the country, around the United Kingdom, that I'm looking forward to visiting just as soon as the restrictions allow me to do that. Thank you so much for that, John. My final question actually is I think it's quite an important one, because so much of this is highly specialist. environmental intelligence, space science. And I'm keen to hear from you about how we make this more accessible to people. But before I do, I just want to give a bit of a plug to the NanoSat satellite design competition that we launched as the Department for Transport, and my boss, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps, and the Prime Minister were here yesterday. There, where you are, to launch it yesterday. The idea there is very much if for young people who are interested in space science, to get that first taste of what that could involve, and just to galvanise that interest amongst young people up and down the country. So what do panellists think can be done here to widen this out and just get people interested in this exciting sector as a potential career path?
I'll have a quick one. I'll hand it to you, Gavin. Yes, it's Ian here, Minister. I think two words for me. One is inspiration, and of course, young people and older people alike are inspired by space. So we just by good fortune happen to be in an industry that people want to engage with. That's very clear to all of us who are in the industry. But the second word is aspiration. And people are in awe of space and the size of it, and all of the questions. The question then is, what can I do about it as a young person? Can I be involved in the industry? And actually, just the very next thing that we're going to come, you maybe can see it in the background there. There's some young people walking by, having a tour around the site. They're just about to open, along with Tim Peake, who's with us, our deep space antenna. And it's actually having those assets here in the UK on the ground that young people can come and visit, engage with, and say, oh my goodness, not only can I be inspired by space, but there is the possibility of me working in the industry. And I think that's a key thing. Having the capability here is one of those things. When I was growing up, space happened in the United States, and it was one of those things that, if you weren't a US citizen, then you might as well forget it. So actually having that program here is really important.
And how exciting, particularly at the moment with the eyes of the world on Cornwall, and you're right in the centre of it all. It's just a fantastic moment. There must be so much excitement there.
Absolutely. I think Gavin wanted to come in.
Gavin.
Yeah, thank you. I think, to inspire school children, undergraduate students, and up to PhD level, I'm the director of one of the AI CDTs in environmental intelligence. And I think this interaction between space, which is very exciting, but also climate change and environmental change is something we can use to inspire people, and also to give a kind of focus to maybe encourage people to get more involved and try to understand and learn more about data science and artificial intelligence. On their own, data science and artificial intelligence are going to be incredibly important for the economy and our futures. And I think if we can use the interaction between space and environmental challenges, and how data science, AI, remote sensing, satellite information can be used for that, I think that gives us a really nice platform across the kind of educational spectrum and into later life as well, to actually get people into these new fields and see that there is maybe an output or an outcome of using AI and satellites that maybe they hadn't thought about before.
Yes, thank you. Raffael, how did you get inspired to enter science and this amazing field, and how do you think more people can become inspired to follow your footsteps?
I was a real truant and not a particularly good student until Mr. Foster found me and showed me how to build a greenhouse when I was in middle school. And that was transformative, growing things, and little tiny seeds bear billions of years of knowledge and can master all kinds of challenges, including cold springs and storms and horrible weather, and sprout a whole oak tree, things like that. Even as a boy, that was amazing. Completely honestly, SuSeWi started under our bed at home, it was a way for me to reconnect with the world. I've been working on photosynthesis my whole life, but my whole adult life. But the fact is, it doesn't take much to get engaged. And one of the things that I think is really important is you can go to the Allen Coral Atlas, which is mapping coral reefs all around the world with AI using satellite data. You can go to the Global Forest Watch, and at a very small local scale, your little nick of the corner, you can see what trees you're growing and how you're growing that. And making things accessible, sort of Google Street Map style or Google Earth style, where everybody can play with it, even if they don't have this enormous knowledge and all this technical skill. The kids are much better at navigating their mobile phones and finding the things that are of interest. And so I think sort of truths and calibration and making it accessible is a fundamental success if people then start using it. And so a shout out to UK Innovate. UK Innovate has been fantastic at helping us to build networks with Scottish Association of Marine Science, Southampton, Welsh company Environment Systems. It's amazing what can happen when you're actually in a room together, which I am very happy about. And so in that sense, I think it is really important to bring people into your world, have those internships, and for them to see that they can do something about combining those data, bringing them together for their own benefit.
I would just maybe add to all the remarks that have been made that I think space is an optimistic industry, an optimistic sector, and that's really what I feel that we've all heard. It's inspirational. We can explore the universe, send rovers to Mars. It also, when we talk about the climate crisis, it's a way that we can come up with solutions. Space is providing the models, the information, the data that will help decision makers come up with the answers to some of these challenges. So that's I think how we attract young people to our sector.
Thank you so much, and can I thank all of the very distinguished and incredibly varied panel, and also thank the University of Exeter for hosting this, and for Goonhilly. I've certainly learned a lot because looking at the application of space-based technologies to the field of environmental assessment and the net zero challenge and biodiversity is something that is quite new to me. And I've certainly felt very, very inspired and optimistic, as Sarah has just said, about the potential for these technologies to help us solve some of these pressing challenges. We in the UK government, we are determined to be at the global forefront of the space industry, to have that long-term strategy that a number of the panelists have referred to, and to work alongside these exciting innovators and our amazing world-leading scientists. So thank you to all of you. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, that the rest of your sessions go well today.
Minister, on behalf of all of the panel, can I thank you for chairing us today and for taking part via the video link. It actually worked brilliantly. I know you couldn't see us, but hopefully you can see our audience. And thank you very much for your time.
Indeed, it's a great pleasure. Yes, thank you, and bye.
Very good.